This session kind of focuses a little bit on application security, history of, a little bit of where it is now, and then we look at kind of solutions in relation to how, I guess, our experiences in the application security space, how we see organizations dealing with application security, building programs to manage security in the context of their applications. And maybe, given this, the conference is about the future of security, maybe take a quick peek at where we see things kind of moving or shifting. So a little bit about myself. I'm based in Dublin in Ireland. I've been involved in the software industry for about 18 years. Technical sales professional for about the last 10 years. In effect, since I got into application security, my main focus has been on sort of technical sales. But I kind of take a view of application security, which is somewhat colored by my software engineering and QA background. So I'm not a hacker. I am interested in what hackers do, obviously, but I wouldn't consider myself a hacker. I spend time helping organizations really understand how to build solutions to help them manage the security of their applications. For those of you who don't know WhiteHat, this is kind of a couple of strap lines, I guess, which kind of gives you a brief overview of what it is we deliver. So, WhiteHat has been around for about 15 years. We deliver fully managed application security assessment services. Now there's a few sort of key tenets called out in these couple of sentences. One is we provide the service on a continuous basis. And super important, being able to test your applications ongoing on a very regular basis or continuous basis. We can assess code bases or live applications. And we spend a good portion of that assessment time validating the output from our activities. So we like to say zero false positives. That's not always the case, but it's near zero false positives. So one of the other, I guess, key or important aspects of how we deliver our services is that we're able to help organizations achieve scale. And we currently manage somewhere in the region of about 6,000 applications for one of our larger customers. We're able to assess currently somewhere in that region, so 6,000 to 7,000 applications at any given time, and actively we're assessing something in the region of 40,000 applications. We've scanned billions of lines of code. We've assessed hundreds of thousands of applications over the course of that 15 years. Any questions? Okay. Now you've probably seen similar slides to this. We know that there's various different sort of threat actors in the space, some of whom have different motivations, some of whom are better organized or better funded than others. So we know that these folks are trying to find new or easy vectors to attack your infrastructure, break into your environment and steal sensitive data. And so again, they've got lots of time. They're typically pretty well organized and pretty well funded. So it is a significant challenge to ensure that all of your applications remain secure on an ongoing basis. And when I got into application security back in 2007, I worked for a company called Watchfire. Watchfire developed one of the first commercially available automated application testing solutions. And that's this is a reference to my early years, I guess, in application security, when we spent quite a lot of time trying to convince people that application security was something that you should be concerned with. We spent quite a lot of time showing organizations that there were vulnerabilities in their applications, and quite often nobody really cared. Quite often a lot of organizations, and to a certain extent this is still the case, a lot of organizations were very much more focused on the infrastructure there. They didn't really get application security at the time. It has, of course, improved, and applications are being used much more heavily in lots of different sort of contexts. And to a great extent, applications almost become your endpoint. But what a lot of the time we sort of tell organizations that they had some quite serious problems in their applications, which could lead to a serious breach, and quite regularly that we were kind of dismissed as a solution that really wasn't required at the time. Obviously, things have moved on since then, thankfully. So that was kind of my initial experiences in the early years. And things haven't really improved significantly in the sense that a lot of the problems that we were seeing back then, and SQL injection, just as an aside, SQL injection will be 18 on the 25th of December, according to this article at least. So I went looking for, kind of to track back and see what were the first references to SQL injection online. And the earliest article that I could find was Frack magazine, published on the 25th of December back in 1998, referring to piggybacked MS SQL statements, so a little bit before SQL injection, what was a term that was properly coined and associated with this particular attack vector. Some of the other interesting comments in this article were that most of the vulnerabilities that were documented at the time had not been made public, and it seems like the web is the way to go. So again, SQL injection, it's been around for many, many years. The only reason I'm sort of referencing this is that it's a vulnerability that's still very prevalent, still very dangerous, but we still see it cropping up in applications time and again. Even though organizations are being made aware continually that as an attack vector, it's still one that is used quite heavily. This particular slide is from a report released by F5, who's a technology partner of ours, in collaboration with Conmon. And of the respondents that were asked about breaches in their application, SQL injection was still cropping up 29% of the time. So even though it's been around 18 years, it's well known. It's an issue that is known to be very dangerous, particularly in certain contexts. It can lead to a complete compromise of an application's database and all the data that sits in that application. And yet it's still very, very prevalent. So we spent time kind of looking at why this is and why that, and trying to understand sort of behaviors within organizations, or is it because developers are not taught how to write secure code? Potentially yes. Do they care? Are there pressures internally to release applications without doing proper security testing? Are there any developers in the room? Okay. So we see this as a recurring theme, right? There's always pressure within organizations to kind of release applications without necessarily assessing them properly. And it usually makes sense, sorry, I'm standing in your way. It usually makes sense to try and do testing as often as possible, as early in the life cycle of the application as possible. So that's why it makes sense to do live application testing, but also you should look at doing code analysis. Code analysis is great because you're operating within the environment that developers are typically comfortable operating in. You're reporting vulnerabilities in the sort of context that they're comfortable with and are familiar with. It's great to see SQL injection still leading the way, but not necessarily. So, given that defenses are well known, you just, quick Google search. OWASP is a great resource for figuring out how to do secure coding and so on. There's a particular prevention cheat sheet for SQL injection. They release cheat sheets for various different vulnerability types. But the defenses for this type of issue have been around a long time, well known for a long, long time. All the other sort of popular vulnerability types that you'd expect to find in an application, again, there's a lot of guidance online that can help you understand how to find and fix these issues. But yet, time and again, we still see these problems cropping up. So I'm not going to spend the whole presentation kind of beating up developers or kind of leveraging or laboring the point about different types of security problems that sit within applications. It's a known issue. But really, it's just kind of to give you visibility into what we see happening quite a lot in the space, and maybe give you some perspective on why it's happening. And as I move through the presentation, we look at some sort of ways to maybe mitigate this behavior, mitigate the introduction of these problems into applications in the first instance. Any questions on that? People familiar with OWASP? The cheat sheet series? So vulnerabilities are indeed everywhere, we know that. This is one of these, I can't remember the name of the website, some of you may be familiar with it, but it kind of illustrates the problem quite well. Kind of blows up the breach reports from around the world. This is a reasonably recent version of that particular graphic. it's from August 2016. So if anybody was under any illusion that the problems don't exist, they indeed do. I think some of these may relate to hacks, so actively trying to break into an application, and SQL injection, of course, is one of those vectors and one of those vulnerabilities that's leveraged. If you're trying to achieve security purely through compliance, it's probably not going to happen. I mean, compliance is it's a nice to have, it's a good thing to have. You need to have it. Regulation calls for it, but building a security program around the compliance regulation is probably not going to make you 100% secure. I'm sure a lot of you already know that. Some of the regulations are getting better, but they're not really fully there yet. So you really need to kind of consider going beyond what your compliance regulations are asking you to do. Questions?
The GDPR allows companies to develop software systems and hardware systems and now look at security before they release their products into the
one would hope so.
You see that doing that?
Yeah.
Because the building blocks to me seems that they're partly of
Yeah, I think that any sort of pressure that sort of gets organizations to focus on doing more around security is going to be a good thing, and if there's any sort of liberal disclosure laws and so on, they can be helpful as well. So if it gets leaked out in the public that you're not building applications in a secure way and taking care of personal identifiable information and so on, yeah, for sure. I think that will be helpful. Any sort of additional I'm not saying regulations are bad, but I'm just saying that they're not a substitute for building a security framework within an organization. That's all. So they usually typically don't go far enough. They're going in the right direction, but not far enough. PCI, for example, is a good example of a regulation which started out quite badly and has improved, but there were gaps. If you were just building programs to manage security in that context, you're going to leave gaps here and there. So it's just important to go over it. Yeah.
The financial situation, 40% of the UK's companies are competing against worldwide. They don't have to take any cognizance of some of this, and yet the government is going to try and push this level of security legally on them. I mean, has it even considered the enormous cost base and the lack of sort of worldwide competition in this?
Well, some jurisdictions are better regulated than others. It's always going to be the case, right? So, I do understand that it may introduce a cost implication, having to introduce security, more security when you're releasing and managing applications. But it is certainly the right way to go as far as I'm concerned. It's otherwise without some level of regulation, and like I said, it could go further. But I think regulation is quite a good thing. It's a good motivator.
I wasn't arguing against you. It's just saying that 40% of our companies are going to face an additional cost base, which in other areas of the globe are not going, and with cheaper labour as well, are just not going to be adhered to.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. Really, I guess it depends on where the application is hosted, where it's going to get used, whether or not you lose customers because you're experiencing breaches all the time. Whether those breaches are disclosed or not is another issue. All of that comes into play. Anyway, not to labour too much more. Compliance, it'll get you part of the way, but it should not be leveraged, or you shouldn't just stop with compliance. You should go further. And I quite often get, certainly within WhiteHat, we've been very good at finding vulnerabilities in applications. We've been doing it for a number of years, 15 years or so. And there used to be this term, it's still probably used, I guess, to a certain extent, of kind of vulnerabilities per dollar. We compete with another vendor, and if you could find more vulnerabilities than the next guy, you had a potentially to win that deal with that customer that you're working with, because just by virtue of the fact that you're reporting more stuff. Now, the reality of that is that a lot of testing processes and approaches are a lot better than others. Some are better than others, right? So if you're just leveraging automation, for example, it's going to produce a lot of noise. That makes life even more difficult for the organization. So not only are you trying to find the problems, but then within maybe a large application estate, you then start generating more noisy results. You have to kind of triage your way through those. So you need to really understand how to implement security in the context of the risk for the organization. It's not really about sort of just doing more security. I mean, that's not probably going to help you fix the issues that exist. So, sometimes that is perception. Just being able to find more stuff means that you're more successful at doing security in your organization. It needs to be done in a sort of a manageable way. Even buying more security software could potentially make your sort of attack surface even bigger. And that has been seen. It needs to be a measured approach. You need to do application security at least, and if we focus on application security in this talk, which we are, you need to sort of build application security programs in the context of helping the organization do business in a secure way, right? So budgets are still misaligned. Budgets are misaligned from my perspective, even in the context of what kind of security solutions should you buy. I mean, typically we tend to see somewhere in the region of about 3 to 5% being spent on application security, and the rest is spent on network infrastructure, which is, all that stuff is important, but it is to the detriment of applications, and application usage and how they're being used is changing. I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes as well. But we quite often just see organizations ultimately not spending enough in the context of application security. But it still needs to be done with helping the business do business in a secure way, supporting the bottom line. So, like I say here, it's expenditure on security product services. It needs to be done in the context of risk management, risk management policy. When you start to drill down into the application vulnerabilities themselves, you'll tend to find that even though we may be helping you find, or whatever vendor you happen to be working with, we may be helping you find serious vulnerabilities in lots of different applications. Some of them may not matter from the perspective of, well, they may not, the impact in the context of the application itself may not be too heavy if something is found and exploited. Or maybe you don't really care so much about that application. So when you're building a program, it needs to be done in the context of the risk to the business. So you focus on your core applications, and focus on removing any serious vulnerabilities that might compromise those core applications, and kind of work from there. Quite often it's not feasible, particularly in a very large application estate, to kind of test everything and then ensure that you're going to be able to address and remediate all problems across all of those applications. You tend to kind of need to get focused on the core assets and sort of grow it out from there. And some of the following slides kind of touch on that as well. People agree with that? Yeah? Okay. So what's the problem? I think everyone knows what the problem is. A few seconds to read that one, but so I mean, again, this kind of talks to pressures within the organization to push applications out without doing proper due diligence around security. We know that ultimately it's a software issue, and software drives the web. And as I mentioned earlier, applications are popping up everywhere in different contexts and for different usages. The whole IoT. Or the industrial IoT space used to be called SCADA, now it's become IoT. All of that stuff, cars with software built into them, and they're internet enabled. Maybe even, and various other things. Applications being built into appliances and having different usages that probably just make things even worse than they already are. Now, this isn't a slant on developers. What this is kind of getting at is it's not that, so a developer fixing a security bug. What I'm trying to say here is kind of, it's a challenging space to operate in. Application security is hard to do. I think that's pretty recognized. Network security, a little bit easier maybe. But I think even talking with some of our technology partners, they agree that application security is harder to do, it's more complex. And the breaches are harder to identify potentially, and harder to remediate as well. So again, I'm not beating up developers. Developers typically still are not taught security in college, for example, before they even sort of take on their first role in industry. they probably don't have a good grounding in building secure applications. This is what we see. Education may not necessarily help all that much either. It is obviously a good thing. You teach your developers when they're working for you to think about designing secure applications. That is a good thing. We've done some research in WhiteHat, and where we've noted certain companies we work with who have delivered educational courses around secure coding hasn't necessarily improved their posture, but probably still in combination with everything else, it's a good thing. So developers. First thing is, do they know what they're looking at or looking for or trying to do? Do they know how to implement the fixes that I mentioned earlier on, for example, for SQL injection, just using that as an example? Do they know how to do that? Is it a case of implementing a fix in one location and then a problem popping up somewhere else? And that's kind of what this reference is to. And to a certain extent, it's a little bit about, a lot of solutions that organizations use don't really help developers all that much. They add more fuel to the fire. They add more hay to the already very large haystack, where it makes it difficult for developers to understand what the problems are, understand what those issues are as well, particularly if those solutions are just piling false positives onto the developers. So it makes life very difficult for them. So this is kind of a reference to two things, I guess. It's developer awareness and implementing fixes that maybe don't really fix the issue or address one issue and cause something else to happen. But also, current solutions just don't make life easy for developers, and ultimately, you need to find solutions that help these teams do security testing and introduce security controls that work well within the context of their day-to-day activities. Security testing shouldn't really be too onerous. Unfortunately, it is. It's not a very easy thing to do. But what we try and do, certainly at WhiteHat, is help the development teams, help them understand where the issues are, understand how to get those issues fixed, understand where the real issues exist, rather than just kind of showing kind of untriaged reports or unverified data to development engineers, and just confusing them even further. So, like I said, it's it is really about finding the needle in the haystack in a lot of instances, and there are a number of different reasons for that. Application, like I said earlier, and I've labored as well a little bit, lots of applications, very large estates in some organizations. And then when you start testing those applications, so to begin with, trying to find that needle in your haystack of applications is tough. Then when you start testing those applications, you're adding even more data to an already challenging problem. And so it's then working through that data to identify the real issues in the core applications that you need to be concerned with, which is a big challenge, a big overhead. And again, it's something that WhiteHat spends quite a lot of time helping organizations do, zeroing in on the real issues. Questions, comments? Does this resonate? Does this make sense? Am I preaching to convert? Okay. I do get onto some solutions in a second. Yeah.
Well, it's just a sort of overall question really about the risks around, for instance, mobile app development, where you've got dependencies on APIs or reference libraries and things like that, which may have vulnerabilities embedded. So then how do you, as a developer, sort that out when it's actually, Apple or Google that have actually created the software?
Yeah, it's a challenge, and it's a challenge that we help organizations address where we can, where there's two aspects to it. It's being aware of problems that have already been published in the context of those dependencies that are being used. The other aspect is kind of trying to break them, or trying to break applications that are using them to see if the dependencies are vulnerable, and then sort of reporting that out. And there's a number of different ways that you can probably look at doing that. Our approach right now, we can help tell you if you're using a dependency that has a known problem with it, for example. That's one way of looking at it. I guess there are other sort of research approaches that you could take. We don't spend a whole lot of time. We do some research into the space, but we don't spend a whole lot of time trying to find unknown problems or kind of 0 days or whatever the case may be. It's not a good use of our time. There are other ways that you can do that, I guess, as well, and report them back. Bug bounty programs, for example, that Apple and various other organizations. Apple have just recently embraced bug bounty, having kind of stayed away from it for a few years. I think it's a good thing. I think bug bounty programs are great. We partner with BugCrowd, one of the larger operators in the space. They're I guess they're a good approach, particularly if you've got a fairly mature internal sort of security framework already in place. I don't think they're necessarily a replacement for doing good due diligence internally yourselves, but they are very good from an oversight perspective. They're very similar to having a pen test done or kind of red teaming type activities being performed. Very, very similar sort of space. But, there are solutions out there to help with that sort of dependency issues come up quite a lot, particularly in the context of source code analysis. So where you know that you're building an application with some proprietary code, and you've also got a bunch of libraries that you know that application is going to leverage as well, and there's a bunch of solutions, including ours, that can help you identify known issues with those dependencies. And it is a big issue. You really need to be doing that. It's actually, thanks for bringing that up, because it is an important aspect of certainly early stage code level assessment, which gets forgotten about. Quite often you'll find that organizations are leveraging solutions to assess their proprietary code, but they forget about the stuff that the open source libraries and so on. So it is something that you need there. And aside from the security problems, using libraries may introduce licensing issues that you may or may not have been aware of, particularly if you're using open source libraries. Just as an example, if you're building applications that leverage open source libraries, you may have to make your proprietary code open source as well. But, again, so things to be aware of when developing applications. Yeah, so like I said, the attack surface is getting bigger, right? Applications are proliferating more and more. You have this concept of IoT, whatever that means to you. Ultimately, it's software running on devices all connected to the internet. IIoT, SCADA systems have sort of morphed into this concept of industrial IoT. But the reality is, applications are popping up in appliances and in places, in some cases that probably have no business, being internet connected. But there you go. Do you need your fridge online? I don't know. And there's a famous Gmail exploit, which passed through a Samsung. Not giving any sort of bad publicity to Samsung, but they had some sort of platform on their fridge which enabled a hacker to exploit somebody's Gmail account that was connected to their fridge. Again, it just mind boggles. And then and then we're moving into the sort of space of automobiles being put online as well, which is even scary. So one of the other kind of interesting, this has been around a long time, right? Digital transformation. Don't know what that is, right? I mean, it's not new. I guess if we take a little bit of a step back and we look at what digital transformation is in the context of the internet, putting a lot of your core processes and business support systems online. And whether you're hosting it yourself, there is a kind of a shift, and some of these questions kind of talk to the challenges in digital transformation. I guess digital transformation was, to a certain extent, originally started out, like I said, as putting stuff online that hadn't been online before for various different reasons. It's kind of shifted again a little bit with the adoption of the cloud. And some organizations are, particularly the heavily regulated organizations, any bankers in the room? Maybe you don't want to, you do want to identify yourself. So, so the reason I brought banking up is very heavily regulated, very risk averse, and traditionally not very comfortable going to the cloud. In more recent conversations over the last year or so, a lot of the financial institutions that we deal with, they are taking, or considering it at least, and some are already going there. And that to me is a little bit of sort of digital transformation. There are some organizations that entire business is online. They've developed their entire model online already, so they're already there. They're more mature. Other more heavily regulated or traditional organizations are slower to adopt, but most organizations are going to the cloud as an example. And with that sort of transformation of moving away from internally supported infrastructure to cloud infrastructure, your security program is probably going to have to change as well. That's kind of what this is about to a certain extent. So, I spend a bit of time helping organizations understand how things may need to kind of shift or change in that context. So some of these questions, And these are just some considerations. It's not a, you know, I mean, there's a whole bunch of other considerations, I guess, that you need to be concerned with, but these are just some of the questions that kind of sprung to mind when I was putting this presentation together. You know, is what you're doing now working? Are you going to the cloud? Do you want to build internal expertise? You know, if you're willing to outsource your infrastructure, are you willing also to outsource your security activity and your security practice? Does it make sense to do the whole shooting match? You know, just kind of transform everything, or maybe not. You know, are your applications being built and managed by security aware teams? And again, that comes back to developer awareness and training, I guess, to a certain extent. Or do you want to build that expertise internally, or do you want to hire it externally? Do you need to scale fast? That's a big concern. You know, and is it a case of sort of re-architecting everything that you're doing? Legacy systems are not easy to re-architect, obviously. Legacy systems typically just have a web-enabled interface, and that can come with a whole host of problems, right? So, and so on. Right? So these are just some of the considerations in the context of sort of transformation. Questions or comments? Okay, if we get to 45 minutes, I'll be happy, then we can all have an early lunch. Kind of running out of runway here a little bit. Okay. Oh yeah, and I just found this. I was watching TV yesterday, and I noticed Ashley Madison. Apologies if there's anybody in the room who works for that organisation, but they're advertising on TV, and I thought, wow, they're still in business, even though they experienced that hack, and it was all over the news, and it was very, very negative. But it seems to improve their business. I mean, so you would think that typically security breaches are a bad thing. Again, it comes down to context in everything, you know, so it's context of what the vulnerability is, where it's been found, and the context of the vulnerability and its impact to an organization. So these guys experiencing, not that I agree with what they offer, I won't make any comment on their sort of business model or line of business, but it's just interesting. I found it interesting that the security breach, rather than having a negative impact on this organization, it has a positive impact. I'll just move on to that. So what's the solution? So we're getting into, well, this isn't the solution, right? So you can't, but often this is happening in organizations, isn't it? Sort of just get it out the door quickly, build the application, because there's internal pressures to get that application built and running, and you know, in front of customers. So the developers, again, who are typically not trained in security, and they may be conscious of security, they may be somewhat aware, but they really don't implement security as part of their day-to-day activities. So it's just build it, get it out, and bolt security on later, let the ops guys deal with it. That happens all the time. You see it all the time. And that's why we talk about trying to build security into pushing it left, building it into the life cycle of an application at an earlier stage. That's when it makes sense. At least maybe the devs can focus on 2 or 3 core issues. You don't have to find and fix everything. You're not going to find and fix everything with static analysis anyway. But maybe you can focus on 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of the really well-known issues that are easy to find with static analysis approaches, and then bolt some security further on when you have a deployed, operationalized application. So, I mean, you know, like I said, doing security very early on in the context of development, I mean, you can remove a whole host of problems if you, at requirements phase, you know, think about security. At design phase, think about security. So you're thinking about building secure applications, and then start testing them. You won't find, state of the art right now, unfortunately, is you won't find everything from a static analysis perspective in an application. Just won't happen. Pen testing and kind of deployed application testing, typically you can find pretty much everything that's likely to affect an application. But it's costly, it doesn't scale, it's time consuming, it's not very repeatable. Static analysis or early stage testing in development tends to be very repeatable. Developers like to automate this stuff. They like to be able to do all of this by just running a script. And again, WhiteHat offers some solutions in that space, but what you want to try and do, like I said, is make it easy for devs. make it easy for them to integrate this type of testing into their day-to-day workflows. So some solutions. Again, there is no best practice. One approach is not going to suit every organization. You need to build solutions in the context of the organization. And there's I kind of step on to kind of a 5-day program. It's just kind of 5 steps. Again, it's just guidance rather than a best practice as such. But to that DevOps, what does anybody doing DevOps? Folks know what DevOps is, right? So most organizations probably aren't really doing DevOps, or they're doing elements of it, or they could even be doing it and they don't even realize it, right? So DevOps is somewhat sort of a broad concept. And some people think it's a development methodology, like Agile. I don't think it is, but again, anyway, so the definition is somewhat fluid, but ultimately, for me, what DevOps is about is, and then moving into building security into that sort of approach is collaboration is the main thing for me when I look at it and think about it. It's collaboration between development teams and operations teams, so this doesn't happen. And I'll go into some more detail on that as we progress through the rest of these slides. DevOps or DevSecOps, and then so when you're talking about DevOps and building security in, there's a bunch of different acronyms that are kind of used for it. So originally it was rugged DevOps. It's also called DevSecOps, DevOpsSec, SecDevOps. Now you might have different reasons to give it those different acronyms, but ultimately we're all talking about the same thing. And it's building security in rather than bolting it on, right? And that's hugely important. And that's why I'm talking about building security controls into the maturity life cycle of your application. Don't just kind of build something and then test it and assume everything's going to be okay. Try and integrate security testing into the life cycle. Try and get buy-in from the different teams within your organization, so that they're all invested in the process, and you all have a vested interest in sort of supporting the bottom line of the organization. So it makes sense to build secure applications. When I was building this presentation, I kind of looked around. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel, so I just kind of went somewhere to find some decent sort of points on what DevSecOps or building security in might look like. This is the URL here, devsecops.org. Have a look at it. There's a bunch of kind of well-meaning and experienced folks who run this website. These are just guidelines, right? Again, there's no best practice in this space, but take a look through these. I think they make sense. The third one for me really sort of says it all, right? It's kind of open contribution and collaboration. Right, so rather than security only requirements, it needs to be done with the rest of the business in mind. It can't be too draconian. You can't introduce security that's going to prevent you building applications or prevent the operation of the organization, right? And that's kind of what a lot of this is talking about. It's talking about collaboration, it's talking about proactivity, it's talking about shared threat intelligence, and so on. Leaning in over always saying no. Just getting engaged and getting involved, getting invested. And this is actually what I think my talk was originally supposed to be about. Is this kind of concept of a 5-day application security program. We also called it, originally it started out as the application security program quick start guide. Within WhiteHat, we donated it to OWASP. It is an active project. I don't think anybody's doing a whole lot with it. We kind of threw it out there just as a guideline. And again, there's some interesting stuff in here. It's useful. You're obviously not going to build an application security program in 5 days. But these are just kind of the five important steps to consideration, right? So, landscape evaluation. And what does that mean? I don't remember all of these, but I'll try and I won't read them all out either. But so understand the lay of the land, super important. Identify operations align with how they operate, how they align with the security mandate, be alert to existing biases. So spend time with the different parts of the organization. Assets and communication plans. Again, jump onto OWASP. All of this material is up on their website. You can pull down, I think it's a PDF and various other information up there which kind of talks to this, but feel free to take notes. I can go slower if you need to take notes. So assets and communication. So get familiar with your estate. So you need to know what you want to protect. You need to know where all those assets are. Define procedures, etc., to help you support that assessment activity in line with the business. Communicate goals of the program. It's not about getting in the way of other teams. It's not about pointing the finger at other teams. It's not about blame. It's about helping the organization do things more securely. Single point of contact, so that there's a certain level of control in relation to the program. Day 3, assessments. So once you've kind of established all of that, then you need to start testing applications. Think about how that needs to happen. Look at your current vulnerability posture. Initiate testing, triage vulnerabilities. Day 4, metrics. And again, small number of points. Here, this is something that we do a lot of. Like I said, we spend a lot of time finding vulnerabilities. We're very good at finding problems in applications. At WhiteHat, lots of vendors are. We do it in a slightly different way to other vendors to help organizations achieve scale and so on. But yeah, I mean, it helps to understand industry metrics, metrics internally as well. And then day 5, the last day, controls and prioritization. Two points to this. Will I implement compensating controls, mitigation controls, kind of the same thing. Remediation controls, just stop making the same mistakes over and over again. Remediation, prioritization. Hopefully, all of these activities will sort of build security into the consciousness of those involved in this activity. So very quickly. Okay, so we've got a few minutes. So a little bit about WhiteHat. Sometimes we're asked to come and speak at these events, and we're asked to kind of stay away from what we do to a great extent. So it's not to be about sort of a product pitch. But oftentimes I sort of get feedback to say, well, you didn't really kind of tell us all that much about what it is WhiteHat does. So this is kind of what we do. A little bit of detail. It's not too deep dive. So this is quite new, so I'm not 100% familiar with all of it. But basically what we've developed is a software as a service platform. This is a vulnerability management, vulnerability assessment platform. We have 160 engineers at 3 different locations around the world. And all of their this kind of is the front end for their activities. We can't do what we do without people. Automation, artificial intelligence, whatever you want to call it, all of that good stuff, only gets you so far, but you obviously need people in the process as well. And this is the platform that supports a lot of our activities. And what we've tried to do is kind of, does that make sense to folks? I can't even recall it. So we have static analysis capability, we have proprietary technology which helps us test source code, we have dynamic scanners which enable us to test live applications, deployed applications. All of that is fed into multi-tenant databases within the WhiteHat cloud. So I mean, we can put a scanner on your premises and that will collect scan data, send it to us for verification. If we're doing live application testing, usually it's done over the internet, so it's just a URL and you can test and collect data, verify that data, and then push that data up into the interface. So we have the central web UI at the top. We're doing analytics, so trying to go beyond just, hey, you have a scary problem. what does that mean then in context? So we're trying to do analytics on that data, help you compare yourself to your peers. And we have integrations with different partners. We integrate with application firewalls, we integrate with IDEs, we integrate with bug tracking solutions, etc., etc., etc. So we're trying to build into and integrate into this sort of whole continuous integration, continuous delivery concepts, the typical workflows that development teams work with. So that's our platform. There's also a bunch of APIs that enable us to obviously, so everyone's doing sort of microservices, web services stuff, right? So we work in the cloud. We have a European platform on AWS in Frankfurt. Our US one is in another sort of cloud infrastructure in California. So we use all of the kind of the outsourced models that I was talking about earlier on. We have APIs, so pretty much anything that's available in the interface can be accessed through an API. You can build your own integrations if you like. We have a bunch of stuff that we've already built, so we give users access to the APIs. And these are the platform tenets, right? API, multi-tenant platform, on-demand rules, continuous vulnerability verification, on-demand scalability, compute, weekly code push protection, and so on. And these are, as far as we know, it's the largest dedicated application security team in the world. It's about 160 engineers in that team at 3 different sites. It's growing all the time. As we build in more customers or bring in more customers, we have to find more engineers. It's not easy. We have what we call the WhiteHat Academy as well. So we have a training program where we take, hopefully if we can get access to graduates, we can train them to be security professionals. They don't have to have done security in the past. In fact, we prefer if they haven't been involved in security necessarily before they start working with us. But all of the folks who work with us go through a training program. Not sure how long it lasts. Yeah.
A question about that. I mean, if you prefer they haven't done security work, are you not deterring universities and people from studying it if you've got a stance of preferring they haven't actually?
When I say that, there are certain reasons why we prefer. One is the wage demands. I'm serious. So when we started out in Santa Clara, one of the reasons why we moved to Houston and into the UK was well, there's a couple of reasons. Wage demands was one. Santa Clara, San Jose, the Valley, it's very hard to hold on to people. There's a huge attrition rate, particularly in security. There's big demand for the skills. So we were training people up, and as soon as the people scaled up, they get snapped up by Google or whoever. So that's the main reason is we are, as it happens, we're partnering with the University of Belfast to run this program. So we're not discouraging it. We are trying to kind of get it absorbed into the organization, into universities, for example. But we don't necessarily, just from the way our margins work and the way the business operates, we probably can't afford to go hire fully skilled, expensive engineers. The way we work, we have a pit crew approach to our assessment activity. So no one individual is responsible for the overall testing of an application. You will be given a specific task. We break it up into 4 or 5 different tasks. So somebody makes sure that the application is available, somebody configures their automation to work with the application, somebody can verify all the output from the scans, and so on and so forth. So it's a team sport. It's like a kind of Formula 1 team. So kind of to your point, you don't have to be fully skilled. We don't necessarily want you to be. You're probably going to be expensive if you are. And there's some of the reasons why we do things the way we do. But I take your point. Yeah.
The next level of robotics is a big pressure to obviously cut wages, take certain security things out, and they're going to be connected obviously to the internet, and then make critical decisions kind of don't mean literally but for themselves. So risk factors on that?
Yeah, lots.
You were talking about putting the safety in first, which is lovely, but I mean the pressure on firms to get the new robotics in just as an easy, not military application, to cut say 15-20% of their workforce out is so high.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's not an area that we work heavily in, certainly in the context of WhiteHat, but I have had conversations with folks who are responsible for these industrial systems, and I don't think, honestly, industry is maybe taking it as seriously as they need to yet, but I think it is becoming a priority for sure. Yeah.
In your 5 steps, where do the threat models of use cases or misuse cases come in?
Good question. don't know, I can skip back to it. Not
I
sure.
don't see any threat modeling or
I think it is in the broader description. These are just some points that we pulled out of for the purposes of today's presentation. But if you go onto the website, the OS website, you can get more information on kind of a more granular approach.
And which static tools do you use?
Sorry?
Static analysis tools?
We have proprietaries.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you think of Fortify?
It's a good tool. In the right hands. Like all tools, you know. It's an older school tool, but you know, it's still a very valid, useful automation. But again, you know, you get out of what you put into these things. You can't expect to plug and play and
Yeah, I think
do everything.
look, people miss the point. You need to start security at design stage. Like, that hasn't come out, and I think you need a secure development policy.
100% agree. I did mention that earlier on. So requirements, design, think about security before you even go down the road of writing code.
And it's security people, so that's how we do things.
You using Fortify?
And we do other tools as well, Fortify.
Yeah. A lot of organizations using multiple approaches and use tools and pen tests and stuff like that for different reasons.
Yeah,
and
we do
so on.
dynamic analysis as well.
Okay. So yeah, kind of running out. I'm amazed that I actually managed to talk for close to an hour. But, so again, this is a little bit about what we do again, or further to what we do. We're trying to build a decision support system for application security. There are plans to go beyond application security and go beyond just dealing with our own data sets. In some cases, we are validating results on behalf of customers that they're generating from other tools, for example. That's a request that we get from time to time. We're doing it for some organizations. We're hoping to build that out as a proper offering. Again, it's all about sort of the SDLC integration as well, helping test in the context of your existing workflows without you having. So we're disruptive in the context of maybe helping you think of different ways to achieve security, but we try not to be too disruptive in the context of you having to change your workflows to accommodate this, if that makes sense. And yeah, we've got thought leaders, we've got patents. So have a look at our blog. We write some interesting stuff from time to time, and it's on our website. Thank you very much for your time.